Every excursion we go on entails a tiny amount of risk, but Canny had no idea that a routine supper at a mall would leave her at the hands of a vicious and cruel killer when she returned to her native country to visit a family member who was unwell. The subsequent events rocked Malaysia to its core and infuriated the populace to the point where important legal changes were made as a result. But what specifically transpired with Canny? What evil tracked her down at a mall, and what occurred after that? Our journey today takes us to a new destination, nestled beneath the picturesque landscapes of Thailand and Vietnam, the twin island nation of Malaysia. Comprising 13 states spread across two landmasses, Malaysia boasts a population exceeding 32 million, making it one of the region's most populous countries. The nation is celebrated for its multicultural society, tantalizing cuisine, and abundance of tropical rainforests scattered throughout its terrain. Home to Malayan tigers, Asian elephants, and diverse primate species, Malaysia serves as a crucial biodiversity hotspot in Southeast Asia. While the country's beauty and diversity are undeniable, it also has its share of shortcomings. The legal system still largely employs capital punishment for heinous crimes. Interestingly, in 1983, Malaysia identified drug smuggling as a significant national issue and consequently mandated the death penalty for all such offenses. In total, 11 categories of crimes entail a death sentence, including murder. However, let's shift our focus to a remarkable woman, 28-year-old Canny Lay Kian. Prepare yourself as her story takes us on an international journey. Born on July 18, 1974, to Perley Visvanavan and On Bijang, Canny was the middle of three sisters. Hailing from a loving family in the quaint city of Ipoh, situated in northern Malaysia, Canny's upbringing was enriched by her family's multicultural background, with her mother of Chinese Indian descent and her father from Singapore. Throughout her formative years, Canny demonstrated her intellectual prowess and dedication, consistently achieving high grades. She had a large circle of friends, was well-liked, and had an ambitious spirit. Her aspirations of studying abroad were realized when she pursued an economics degree in the tropical haven of Hawaii. Her decision was met with overwhelming support from her friends and family. After graduating in the 1990s, Canny ventured to the bustling city of Los Angeles to seek employment. Her adventurous spirit and determination led her to a job at a marketing firm, allowing her to comfortably sustain her life in the city. It was during this phase of her life that she met her future husband, Brandon Mong. Born to Chinese parents who had migrated from Singapore to Los Angeles 2 decades prior, Brandon had spent most of his life as an American citizen. This perfectly complemented Canny, who had no plans of returning to Malaysia. The couple quickly connected and tied the knot in 2001, subsequently settling in San Diego to embark on their marital journey. Though they did not have children immediately, they became proud parents to a cat. Their lives seemed to be progressing smoothly until early 2003, when Canny received devastating news. Her father, still residing in Malaysia, had been diagnosed with kidney cancer. The distressing diagnosis deeply affected Canny and her family, yet she remained resolute in her determination to provide the best support possible from her location across the Atlantic Ocean. Keeping a vigilant eye on her father's condition, she was involved in the decision to pursue surgical intervention. In an effort to be present during this crucial time, Canny secured a flight back to Malaysia, leaving the United States and her husband, who was entrusted with their feline companions, on June 1, 2003. Fortunately, her father's operation was successful, marking the commencement of a gradual but consistent recovery journey. Canny felt reassured enough to plan her trip back to the United States as a result of this encouraging development. She arranged her flight for June 14, 2003. The night before her departure, she savored a final dinner with her family at a local shopping center, cherishing the precious moments before her return journey. At Monty's restaurant and wine bar, ensconced within the bustling Bangsar shopping center in Kuala Lumpur, the family enjoyed a sumptuous meal of steak and fried crab. A snapshot from that evening depicted a harmonious family, with Canny's radiant smile standing out among them. Sensing her mother's fatigue after the meal, Canny kindly offered to drive her home before returning to the gathering. Accompanied by her sister, the trio made their way to the underground parking lot. Upon reaching the pay machine, Canny realized she had left her ticket in the car. She instructed her relatives to wait while she hurried back to retrieve it. What should have been a brief errand turned into a 20-minute absence, prompting concern from her mother and sister. Attempts to contact her via mobile phone led to voicemail, and subsequent calls were directly cut off, indicating that the phone had been switched off. This sudden shift in events instigated worry, and upon reaching the parking area, they discovered Canny's purple Proton tire was missing. Confusion and mild panic set in at this point, causing the two anxious relatives to inform the rest of the family. Together, they initiated an unplanned search for Canny. The once present young woman seemed to have abruptly disappeared. After reaching out to the car park security team, they implored them to review any relevant surveillance footage. Together with the security officers, they traced Canny's last known movements, which resulted in a chilling discovery. Although Canny was seen walking to her car, she was oblivious to the strange figure following her. Both eventually disappeared from view, only for her purple Proton tire to be later seen navigating the parking lot before exiting through the barriers. Within the car, an unidentified individual occupied the driver's seat, with a visibly frightened woman, presumed to be Canny, seated beside him. To everyone's dismay, it appeared that Canny had been kidnapped. An hour after her disappearance, Canny's abduction was reported to law enforcement, and she was officially declared missing. Later, it would be revealed that the car park surveillance footage was not her last sighting. Just before midnight, two undercover officers identified a suspiciously parked vehicle matching the Proton's description. As they approached, two figures became visible. To their astonishment, Canny Ong was in the car, appearing unharmed, accompanied by a previously unknown man. The officers demanded identification from both, which they presented. The man was identified as 27-year-old Ahmad Najib Harris. While their IDs were being checked and Ahmad was distracted, Canny subtly waved her hands, attempting to signal the officers. Unaware of her intentions at the time, the officers later regretted not recognizing the signs of her distress. Upon noticing Canny's actions, Ahmad abruptly accelerated, disappearing into the night and leaving the officers with their IDs. Reacting quickly, one officer fired at the vehicle's tires, managing to deflate one. Unfortunately, this did not halt the vehicle, and Canny was whisked away into the night. An hour later, the pair were once more seen when a stranger asked a woman and her brother for a car jack. The woman noticed a distraught woman in the front seat of a nearby car, frantically signaling for help. Meanwhile, Ahmed busied himself changing the front tire. Sensing something was amiss, the woman memorized the purple car's license plate and later relayed it to the police. Ahmed, realizing the tire change was taking too long, abandoned his efforts, returned to the car, and fled with Canny. This would be the last known sighting of Canny Ong. Days passed without any trace of Canny. The grim reality set in, and her heartbroken family was tasked with informing her husband, Brandon, who was anxiously awaiting news thousands of miles away. The tension left in her wake continued to permeate for a while. On the third day of the investigation, an appalling revelation was made. On June 17th, construction workers detected a horrendous odor emanating from the roadside. Driven by curiosity, they traced the source of the smell to a small manhole. Suspecting that a creature might have crawled in and perished, they decided to investigate further. To their horror, beneath a couple of cement-filled tires at the bottom of the manhole, they discovered the charred remains of a petite female body, barely identifiable. Officers arrived promptly at the scene and discerned that the victim had been bound with a piece of cloth around her neck, her arms constrained across her chest. Aware of Canny Ong's recent disappearance, the police promptly contacted her family to assist with identifying the body. In a different part of the world, Brandon, a relative, anxiously awaited the news. Unfortunately, a combination of forensic evidence and positive identification by the family confirmed their worst nightmare. Post-mortem reports revealed that Canny Ong had been stabbed twice in her abdomen and subsequently strangled. Her abandoned vehicle, a Proton tire, was found later that day with one tire deflated, and a substantial bloodstain was found on the back seat, which was later confirmed through testing to belong to Canny. In an act of sheer stupidity, the perpetrator, despite leaving his ID with the police officer, returned home nonchalantly. Utilizing his ID card, officers located him the next day at his residence, which he shared with his unsuspecting girlfriend. A chilling thought considering she was oblivious to the fact that he had committed such a heinous crime just the night before. Forensic analysis discovered Ahmad's DNA in the car, at the scene where the body was discovered, and tragically, inside Canny's body. Conversely, Canny's DNA was also found on his clothes. With the irrefutable evidence stacked against him, Ahmad had no alternative but to confess, in a desperate bid to avoid the death penalty. Following his confession and corroborative testimonies, investigators reconstructed a comprehensive account of the night's events. Ahmad had driven to a remote area beneath a deserted bridge after attempting to change his tire. There, he coerced Canny at knife point to move to the back seat, and between 1 and 5 a.m. subjected her to repeated assaults. When Canny fought back, he stabbed her twice in the stomach, leading to her blood covering the back seat. She was then bound, strangled, and discarded into a nearby manhole, where Ahmad heartlessly concealed her with 2 tires. He subsequently abandoned the car in a nearby warehouse, hitched a taxi ride home, and, to add insult to injury, returned with 2 petrol canisters the next day, poured them down the manhole, and set it ablaze. Interestingly, many murderers erroneously believe that fire can completely destroy evidence of their crime. However, full cremation can only occur between 1,000 and 3,000 degrees Celsius, or 1,800 and 5,500 degrees Fahrenheit for Americans. A typical gasoline fire wouldn't achieve this temperature, leaving the evidence intact. After 3 days of thorough investigation and a damning trail of evidence, Ahmed Najid was officially arrested and charged with the kidnapping, assault, and murder of Canny Ong. This case sent ripples of shock throughout Malaysia. Despite the severe penalties, murder cases in this country are rare, but the sheer savagery and disrespect exhibited in this case incensed the entire nation. Although the path to justice was forecast to be long and arduous, proceedings commenced swiftly. Owing to the public's fervent demand for prosecution, his trial began merely 3 months later on September 15, 2003. In an unexpected turn of events, it would take several years before a final verdict would be delivered. During his trial, Ahmed presented himself as a sympathetic figure who was looking out for Canny. He alleged that it was a case of mistaken identity and that his actual target was a former employer. According to him, upon realizing that Canny was not the woman he had mistaken her for, they both shared a laugh about the mix-up. He then purportedly tried to befriend her, later suggesting they engage in sexual activity. Ahmed claimed that her silence implied consent. He also asserted that he was forced to stab her in self-defense and that he even tried to assist her by asking her not to move. Initially, the accused, Ahmad, purported to offer the victim, Canny Ong, a ride to the hospital. However, he quickly reneged on his offer, citing a lack of funds for her treatment. As her condition worsened and death seemed imminent, he purportedly offered her a passage to heaven before cruelly ending her life and discarding her remains. It is incontrovertible that his narrative was a fabrication, devoid of any compassion or consent. The evidence at hand served to validate his violent actions unequivocally. During the trial, it was revealed that Ahmad had a history of violence and had assaulted 4 other women on separate occasions. Regrettably, these women chose not to testify due to the shame and stigma associated with his actions and the potential public exposure that would ensue. As is standard in homicide cases, Ahmed underwent a professional psychological evaluation to determine his mental competency and accountability. The severity of the penalties in Malaysia necessitated an especially rigorous assessment. Regardless, Ahmed was deemed mentally sound and therefore responsible for his actions. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, including his own written confession, Ahmed pleaded not guilty to the charges of murder and assault. His legal team, whether by choice or obligation, fiercely defended him. They scraped together every conceivable excuse to mitigate, exonerate, or even validate Ahmad's actions, a litany of absurdities too lengthy to detail here. One of the most outrageous arguments put forth by the defense was an attempt to shift blame onto Canny. They questioned why she hadn't seized the multiple opportunities to escape from Ahmad. They proposed that Canny's failure to flee was not due to abduction, but rather indicative of her compliance with and even consent to the events of that fateful night. They further disrespected the victim by suggesting that the cloth tied around her neck was indicative of a sexual fantasy gone awry, perhaps resulting in accidental death. This theory was swiftly dismissed upon the revelation that the cloth had been tied tightly around her neck. This was evidenced by the fact that the area beneath the cloth was the only part of her body unaffected by the fire. The defense's narrative failed to account for her stab wounds, a detail they conveniently overlooked. Ultimately, their defense crumbled, and on February 23rd, at the Shah Alam High Court, Ahmed was found guilty of the assault and murder of Canny. His sentencing was severe. For the assault, Ahmed received a 20-year prison sentence. For the murder, he was handed the death penalty, and to add insult to injury, he was also sentenced to 10 lashes of the cane. Canny's loved ones found solace in the harsh sentence. They felt that a brutal killer had been met with a fittingly brutal fate. While it couldn't bring Canny back, they believed justice had been served. Despite initially accepting the verdict, Ahmed later contested his conviction in 2007 and again in 2009. Both appeals were denied. The audacity of a murderer to pursue his own interests after selfishly ending another's life is a testament to his cowardice. Ahmad's attempts to evade punishment continued with an appeal for mercy to the Sultan of Selangor, the head of state, and the Islamic religion. His plea was rejected, sealing his fate. On September 23, 2016, over 13 years after Canny's murder, 40-year-old Ahmad Najib Aris met his end by hanging at Kajang prison. For Canny's family and loved ones, this marked the end of a long journey for justice. Although the execution brought some catharsis, it could not fill the void left by Canny. She was a vibrant, independent woman with lofty dreams and impressive accomplishments. Canny was taken from her family while she was selflessly supporting them, driving her mother home after a long day. Unbeknownst to them, their farewell that evening was not just until her next visit, but a heartbreaking goodbye forever. This incident, marked by its sheer brutality, shook Malaysia to its core due to its occurrence in a bustling shopping center. In the aftermath, a wave of safety measures swept across the country, with many car parks introducing women-only parking spaces and shopping centers bolstering their security through additional personnel and surveillance equipment. Regrettably, it often requires such tragic instances to ignite the spark of change. Canny's untimely demise, while a significant loss, served as a catalyst in enhancing the safety of millions of Malaysian women. Even 2 decades after her passing, it's certain that her memory lives on in the hearts of her family and friends. As I conclude this discussion, I extend my gratitude for your engagement with another video today. If you found this case intriguing or enlightening, I encourage you to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already.